You're listening to Grain of Salt, a podcast hosted by Donnie Burles and Christa covering the Buffalo and Niagara region's food and drink scene. Today's episode features Christa talking with chefs James Roberts of Toutant and Brad Rowell of Elm Street Bakery about truth in menu, the farm-to-table movement, and sourcing.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Grain of Salt, a podcast that sort of covers the food and drink scene as it is currently happening in Western New York. Today, I'm Christa, and I am here with two very good friends of mine, Chef James Robert, who is soon to open Toutant, and was formerly at Park Country Club and is well known in the industry amongst his peers as one of the sort of best, most educated, most technically gifted chefs in the area. And Brad Rowell, James raises his eyebrow. Brad Rowell is here with us. He is the executive chef at Elm Street Bakery and has a long, storied history, a really fantastic, sort of interesting career. You worked for April Bloomfield for a while in New York. You also worked at St. John, right?
Staged at St. John.
Staged at St. John. Can we talk just a little bit more, Brad, about your background, since I will not do it justice?
Yeah, definitely. I started cooking in Boulder like 12 years ago. I started as an oyster shucker, did that for a couple of years at a really cool restaurant, kind of just got lucky getting the job there, and ended up in the kitchen on the third year. I was working with a guy named Dave Query, who owns now 12 restaurants in Boulder and Denver, and is a great restaurateur. Worked for him and got interested in cooking. Went to New York, went to the French Culinary Institute, which was what it was called at the time, and then worked at
I know a bunch of people went there when it was French Culinary Institute.
Yeah, solid school. And then worked at Spotted Pig. Went and worked at a butcher shop for almost a year. Also, after the Spotted Pig in New York, and then went to Europe and did stages and traveled. Came back here, worked at Daniel's for about a year, and then went out to Denver, opened a restaurant with a guy I met in culinary school.
Which was very successful and won a bunch of awards. I know that I was able to easily find information about it on L and Bon Appetit, and a bunch of people wrote it up because it was really successful.
Yeah, we had a nice New York Times.
What was the name of it again?
Golden Gray.
Thank you.
Still open. They've expanded, and but my wife and I knew we were going to come back to Denver, or to Buffalo eventually from Denver, and we decided, why wait to have to restart after 10 years? Let's just go now. And I always kind of felt like Buffalo's our home anyway. It felt like my life was happening in Buffalo, even though I was in Denver. And we loved Colorado, but came back and worked for James for about 3 years. Yeah, as sous chef. And
gosh, was it really been that long?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then it's been almost 2 years since, right?
1 year, and I've been at Elm Street for a year.
Kicking ass down there, by the way.
So just doing our thing down there, trying to figure out what we're doing and having fun.
So we're here again with Brad Rowell and James Roberts, and our goal today is to talk about two sort of things and how they are interrelated. First, I'd like to say, James, hat tip for the Pappy Van Winkle bring along. It's definitely trumping my gas station chips in Labatt Blue.
No, that's actually the beauty of it.
Although you did eat a Slim Jim, I will.
It's the beauty of the entire situation. It's like Pappy Pizza, Pappy and sour cream and onions, Pappy and Slim Jim. I mean, that's the way it goes.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
It is.
So today we're going to talk about truth in menu.
The secondary bourbon market.
We're going to talk about truth in menu. And the reason why I've asked you guys to come talk about this is because it's something that you both deal with in terms of the types of food that you cook. Being very forthcoming on your menus is imperative for the diner to understand what it is you're trying to do. There's lots of room that you could be playing around with that, but I know neither of you do. And so that's part of you're both very passionate about the subject. And I think as two people who have spent a long period of time in the area working with farmers and sourcing farm-to-table items. We're going to kind of talk about how Truth in Menu relates to that, too, and we'll talk about some of the where we've come in as far as farm-to-table sourcing goes for restaurants and sort of where we need to go. So I want to start the podcast off by just talking briefly about federal Truth and Menu laws, and I'm going to actually read something. So federal Truth and Menu laws require that menu planners accurately describe dishes and fairly represent prices and other charges on their menus. Accuracy in menu development involves more than honestly describing an entree and precisely stating a price. It also means being careful when describing many food attributes, including preparation style, ingredients, origin, portion sizes, and health benefits. And so we're talking about everything from specific branding of origin or location of origin, as well as quality levels and all of those things as consideration. Preparation, I think, is probably one of the things we rarely see people kind of play around with, but I would imagine that it happens to some extent.
No, there's certainly 10 different ways to skin a cat. I mean, if you,
Sure.
There are, like, we say preparation-wise, we say sometimes sautéed, you say pan-seared, you say, pan-roasted. Like, there's a ton of different ways to describe what is essentially the exact same
Technique.
type of heating and cooking.
Right.
So yeah, I'm sure that it's played around with quite a bit, but I don't think it's to the detriment of the customer. I think if you're descriptive
When you're talking about preparation,
if you're Forster and you're basting and you say it's a basted piece of cod, then you're still searing it in a pan,
right?
But just because you're developing the flavor and kind of open cooking it by hot fat, by blading it over the top of it, does it make it any different? I mean,
I think you see a lot less advertising on techniques on menus now than you did, 5-10 years ago.
I would agree. Mostly people are simply listing ingredients without a lot of sort of open discussion of preparation.
Unless you really want to highlight the preparation.
What you did, right.
And that's, like you said, basted. Or for us, some like wood roasted stuff.
Sure.
It always depends. If there's something that like you think is really special about it, you'll probably list the technique. If not, you usually see it.
Well, I think a lot of people. I think that's probably a good way to say that that's how a lot of people maybe would falsify some of that too. Now, I mean, in hindsight, now that I look at it, I mean, if you say like sous vide, like people say, "Oh, I've cooked this, piece of fish in sous vide," or some people would say slow poached or low temperature cooked or something like that. I mean, you're essentially, I don't think you or I would maybe make a big point to say that it was cooked that way, but I think that some people may say something like that to maybe sell it to the customer who doesn't know or hasn't had it. Like they would say, like trying to upsell it a little bit or trying to make it sound fancier, when in reality you could probably achieve the same thing with like a shallow poach.
Well, that's it. You can see a good way of like when sous vide first came out and people were like really excited about it, everything was sous vide,
right.
And then it became less cool,
right?
And it started being like
a
slow
taboo,
poached and
a little taboo,
and all these other terms,
right? Like circulated.
Well, so here's what I think. I think that the preparation aspect came because when the law was first instituted, the first thing that happened was in San Francisco. People decided in 1972 that they were frustrated with restaurants serving convenience entrees that had been prepared elsewhere and frozen, and then were reheating them in restaurants. So that combined with people claiming that fish had just come off a fisherman's wharf and it hadn't, started this whole thing. Actually, Ralph Nader was the one who started this whole thing in San Francisco to get an ordinance passed about Truth in Menu because he had come from a family of restaurateurs. But the law didn't actually pass there. What happened was it ended up being taken on by Los Angeles in 1974, and that's when they really moved forward with it and passed law, and now there are federal laws. And so I think that some of the preparation has to do with this idea of reheated food that's been prepared elsewhere and less about whether or not we're braising something or basting it or whatever.
It's funny because there's a in France right now, I believe there's the same type of thing going on, right?
Where you're not allowed to call yourself a restaurant unless you're making things from scratch. Right. They're trying to use a different term, and I don't recall what it is. But if you're in Paris, I think, and I don't think it's all
like
of France. I think it's Paris.
Or house
that
or
if you're bringing food in that's pre-made in any capacity, that you're not allowed to call yourself a restaurant.
Like
and I think
tavern.
So in the 70s, apparently when this law first passed, there was massive numbers of lawsuits over this. People were being sued for claiming something was butter when it was margarine. People were being sued for saying they had Maine lobster when they didn't have Maine lobster. It was a big deal. That seems to have largely gone to the wayside. I don't know if it's because we it is almost impossible for any of us to even know where the food we get at the grocery store comes from, nonetheless where a restaurant gets its food from. I don't know if that's why.
I think maybe it's starting to kind of
less of a
self-regulate
concern.
itself because
Is that what you think?
because the consumer is a little more educated and is it accessible. I mean, like everybody has access to like, you know, every company, a main company, food producer has to have their like ingredients or their like nutritional values or stuff like that online or some sort of documentation. I mean, I think that, you know, if it's gone by the wayside a little bit, it's maybe because it's hard. It's not as easy to hide it. Like, you know, when you like Snackwell's like low fat, you know what I mean? Like, is it really healthy? Or they'll label it like a healthy cookie, but just because it's low fat doesn't mean it doesn't have like tons of other
it's
stuff
terrible
in it.
for you.
Right,
actually.
right. So exactly, you know, so like I think as a country, as Americans, we were kind of part of that hoax.
We bought into the
commercialized food, the industrialized food, and in the process of that, they had to sort of like home up their wording of their products, like the marketing had to be somewhat familiar to someone who was used to having home cooked meals, and then they were like, oh, we're going to sell you these, you know, deli sliced ham or, you know, honey ham or, you know, whereas like if you were raised on a farm and someone actually, you know, made ham, then, you know, you possibly could familiarize yourself with that and be like, oh, I would buy that. It tastes good. It reminds me of my childhood. But actually, it was probably just a pumped,
right,
like massively processed, industrialized piece of meat that was from like a deli producer or something.
So I think that we could certainly talk about the history of truth and menu laws and how we got to where we are and the halo of health that branding does and all of that stuff. But I think that's probably a 4-hour podcast.
Yeah.
We should probably do that in a bar.
That's
But
fine.
I think that what I want to kind of focus on is that I think that contemporarily what we see issues with in truth and menu, and this is what I found in my research before I came and talked with you guys today, it's a couple things. We see meat companies that are using transglutaminase
Transglutaminase.
Thank you. To hold together pieces of cheap cuts of meat to look like filet mignon,
Sure.
and are selling them as filet mignon to their knowingly to their knowing purchasers, who are then passing them on to customers who are unaware of the fact that it is not filet mignon.
There's a lot of problems there.
Then there's the issue with seafood, which is monstrous. And in fact, just yesterday, Huffington Post published a story about people who have said that they have come up with a piece of equipment that can scan a cut of fish and tell you what its actual genetic makeup is, because there's massive issues with people passing tilapia off as red snapper and on and on. So that's an issue. And then I think
the difference between those two. You should be in red snapper.
You cover it in sauce, though. People are like,
but it's true. It's what people are doing.
Sauce, right? Yeah.
There's so much more restaurants outside of just like the small, like, you know, kind of like community that we probably eat at, and you know, there's people in, you know, other towns that don't have great restaurants that are eating. So
have you ever eaten anywhere in the Midwest?
Right.
Like, that's all you got to think about. Is most of the restaurants are in the Midwest, and what are people
trouble.
eating?
No one knows at all. They don't
Everything
care.
comes in a plastic bag.
Just it's all sustenance at that point.
And
It's
then
like nothing.
the last half of this, because I want us to talk about all of these things. So modern truth and menu issues: fish, the use of chemicals to produce false products, like we talked about with the filet mignon, and then the final would be provenance. So we're talking about things that are called organic when they're not organic, and things that are called farm or local or fresh when they are not any of those things, or they are a variation of those things.
Locally delivered.
Right. So I'm gonna kind of start us off talking about seafood. You guys both have careers that you've spent a lot of time with seafood. A lot of chefs who grew up in Buffalo and have come up here and solely worked here don't really have a lot of exposure to seafood. Being a Seattleite, I have some experience with it, and I know that it's something that's close to both of you. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening with labeling in seafood and the quality of seafood that's even available in Buffalo versus what some people are maybe claiming that they are sourcing.
It's hard for me to really talk about like what I believe is good for Buffalo as far as seafood is concerned. I mean, I grew up where, you know, my grandfather would pick live shedding crabs out of our trawl net that we had just dumped in the box in the front of a boat and throw it in a bucket of cold water for me and my young, 3 and 5 years old, my brother to watch come out of its shell as a soft shell crab to bide our time while they actually worked doing the shrimping. Like it was like, here, you kids stay busy, watch this crab come out of its shell. I thought everybody ate like that as a child. I mean, when I grew up and moved to even the north of the city and then up to upstate New York and then around to Texas and stuff. I mean, I just thought everybody had that access to that fresh seafood. And only when I really came up here that I realized that the transit of fresh seafood is an incredibly complex process. I mean, somebody like Wegmans, for example, people say, oh, where would you buy seafood? And right now I'm buying a lot of it for home. Where would you buy seafood for you to eat? And I said, well, first, number one, I would buy it from a place that sells a ton of it.
Right, so that it's fresh.
Number one, it's got to move. And, a company like Wegmans, I don't know their system exactly, but they turn a lot of product. They have a relatively low inventory in each store. So their buying process probably comes from a boat, from a dock, whether it be big or small, from a dock to a buyer, then centrally shipped to a central commissary, which in just alone, the transit time on the boat to dock to truck is probably a day, 2 days, right? And then 2-3 more days to a warehouse, and then distributed amongst their orders from their central warehouse delivery system to each store. So that's another 2-3 days, right? Maybe. And then in the store, however long it sits in the store, even if at the best case scenario, it only sits 2 days in the store, you're already at 8 days old. 9 maybe out of the water. So truly fresh seafood from what people know in my Gulf Coast communities, Nantucket, Massachusetts, Boston, the Cape, Florida, the Gulf Coast, Virginia, like there's places like that. I mean, they know just out of rigor mortis seafood.
Yes.
I mean, like incredibly fresh.
Yes.
I mean, we used to go and my dad would fillet the redfish that we caught that morning, and my mom would be inside with a pan of hot oil. Like we would be skinning it, breading it, frying it. And you don't see that. People talk about that a lot. They talk about like the Caribbean and stuff. You go down the dock and buy this fresh grouper. This guy's got an ice chest inside the road. I mean, it's nearly impossible. Now, there are more, I think, advantages in the market nowadays, more advances where people are actually sourcing what they call day boat, where essentially it's not a trip boat. So like that fisherman, instead of going on a long trip, actually only goes out one day and comes back in the same day.
So he doesn't have the whole base of
doesn't
his
have the
ship
storage
full
filled
of
with
ice
crushed ice.
Right.
Well, but I mean, like when you talk about like tuna and halibut, I mean, the guys that have to go long range,
right? He's not going to catch. Right.
They're packing it really tight. So if it's 3 days on 31-degree crushed ice in the hull of a boat on the water, I mean, is it better packed than something you bought on the dock and then was shipped 3 days in a truck? Like, right. I mean, pick your battle, But I think that there are more sourcing advantages now from
there
companies.
Are options.
Options that would, you can pick, certain ways to get it here faster. I think from internally in the continental U.S. I think, places like, us, for example, Buffalo, I mean, we're exactly, 340 to 400 miles, depending on where you go, Boston, New York, from the coast. And that's probably our shortest distance to really fresh seafood.
But there's probably only 5 or 6 restaurants in town that are sourcing their fish that way.
Yeah, but the main suppliers have to. I mean,
right.
Places like Schneider's and, like some of the broadline distributors, I mean, they have to buy that way. That's the only way they're going to buy, haddock, cod. I mean, our fish fry in Buffalo. I mean, in Rochester and Buffalo, upstate New York, the fish fry is notorious, right? It's a big hang off the edge of the plate piece of cod. And we can have that conversation all day. But, I mean, the balance of...
Or you can.
Are fresh... Right, I like it. I like it all kind of ways.
I think there's some real issues in Buffalo as far as like seafood goes, and especially getting really fresh stuff delivered straight from the coast. Is that our location in the costs?
Shipping costs.
The shipping costs is because we've gone through 5 different seafood purveyors since I've been at Elm Street, and
you've been there a year.
Aurora. Yeah, and most of them have. We started with one from Boston, and they were delivering, and then they were like, "You're in East Aurora. We're going to have to add $75 more to your each shipment
from Buffalo."
Yeah, and that was was like $60 to Buffalo, but then they wanted another $75 to come to East Aurora. So we were like, "All right, well, we can't do that because now you can't make any money.
Now you're losing money on your fish.
I mean, you're already so tight that you're so close anyway." And then another company we worked with out of Maine. They were like, all right, our basic shipping rate will be such and such a price. Well, they ship it in 1 day, and it's not getting there for 2 days. Now, because we're on this edge of for delivery, there's zones. So they're saying they're shipping something in a day. It's getting there in 2 days. You're opening it up. It's at like 53 degrees. And you're like, all right, now here's another one out the window. So you kind of... I've talked to a lot of other chefs about like seafood here, and you just have to kind of find what
It's
works
hard.
for you.
It's
and,
hard unless
Well,
you're
and
willing
I
to pay
think
the FedEx. Gedra, Mike, guys like that will
Right.
tell you that if they're going to drop fresh fish in the city, which they do. I mean, those guys have
Those guys and Cooney,
they
right.
have impeccably fresh fish, seafood programs. They have a way, but it has an incredible cost. I mean, the reason why you pay $4 for a piece of nigiri tuna is because that's what it costs to get it to you.
To get it here from Hawaii or whatever.
The margins are super thin. I mean, like people expect like a $12, or I say fish back to fish fry again. That's just my market because I just came out of a country club. But I mean, if you have to pay $12, $13 for that piece of fish to get here,
There's
how are you
no
going to charge
money if you're making a
$13?
fish
Right?
fry.
And like we've said that all
Well,
along.
and I think that's a challenge is that sort of the expectation of the consumer. First of all, people here aren't big fish eaters. They aren't really a lot of people. I mean, the fact that raw bars are making it in this town blows me away because when I first moved here, you couldn't even get people to eat sushi, nonetheless.
Yeah, but shellfish
raw
is a little
oysters.
more versatile,
I
a little
agree.
more durable.
But
durable.
I think that it's the expectation of the customer is that they should be able to buy fish for a big fish fry for $13, and that they don't really know what super fresh fish is, and so the evaluation, the idea of like I'm happy to pay $40 for an entree that's got great fresh fish on it because I can't get that anywhere else. That doesn't really happen here. People are like, I'm not paying that.
I hope it's going to start.
Well, it needs to because I mean
really-
the truth
I'm
is
betting on
like we are a more diverse group of people than we used to be, and there are people here who live here now who have eaten all over the world and who have a better appreciation for that.
Sure.
So there is a market for it, but how big is that market and does it exist outside
Yeah.
of city proper? I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think out with us in East Aurora, we definitely see people that are willing to
Travelers,
pay, and
for sure.
Yeah, that and people that live in East Aurora as well. Like East Aurora is kind of maybe a unique community, I think, in Western New York in some ways, and
a
you
little
definitely
wealthy.
have people that are out there that want quality, and they'll just pay for it.
Well,
And,
there's the health aspects that are associated with being upwardly mobile and white certainly exist there. People are very concerned about their diets, and they also travel a lot.
Right.
People in that community have expendable income
and
to
you have
travel.
business travelers as well, like with
Right.
Moog and Fisher Price out there, and some of the other companies. So you get a lot of people from LA and New York and coming through, and it's not necessarily about the money, but just people are looking for quality. We're not charging a ton for our stuff anyway, but like we're.
But if you use it
trying
as
to
if you use it as an attraction, like you have found a way, and I've noticed on your menus to find a way to highlight something like rainbow trout, for example, which is
Yum.
clearly a farmed fish. It's incredibly delicious, especially when impeccably fresh, and then roasted whole in a wood oven is an amazing preparation. Like that is a balance of you saying cost, what can I give them, what is delicious, and what is still in that fish kind of leading marketing, saying we're going to have fresh seafood, right? I mean,
Why didn't you bring that, Brad?
Right. I mean,
I think
that's
it's
the goal, though, right?
yeah,
Like, it forces us to be creative where we are.
Right.
Like, you just
I agree.
can't,
Well,
you
and
can't
that's
drop a
Gedra's whole
group-
program,
you can't
too.
drop a group
Right.
basket
I mean,
on people for $14 like you can in Jacksonville
Right.
or Fort Myers. Because there's not a guy, right? There's not a guy with fresh group.
I think
right
that's a
there.
good example. If you can get more money out of the fish than you can, just cutting the fillet, and you can make some more money in different spots with the heads and with roe and whatever else you can get out of it. Then I think that you can.
You have the technical ability to do so.
Well,
right?
or
Like, we talked about
Gedra's
Gedra,
program.
right,
Gedra brings in bottom feeders, cuttlefish and all kinds of stuff that are amazingly delicious and totally underappreciated
Exposing
in this
people to
market,
new stuff.
and is
Right.
preparing them in really interesting ways. And it's fish that he's able to get at a decent price, and so and it's sustainable. That's
It's
his
forcing
whole.
us
That's
to do
really
that.
his whole mode is to not be eating predator fish, right?
Sure.
So, I think he does a really fascinating job with that, probably more than a lot of other
for
people
sure,
in the
and
area
it's
do.
paving a lot of different people's palates. So even for people like us, I mean, when we see that he's selling the stuff incredibly, fast,
Yes.
or even with these preps that are sometimes they're familiar to people in Buffalo, which is his gateway in. Sometimes they're not.
Yeah, no, he does a good job of throwing some crazy shit on there.
But the key there is freshness, and the key is the technical prowess to be able, I think, to handle that sort of thing.
Well,
like
and he has earned a
storage.
trust with his
Right.
customers too.
Sure.
Right, and doing like fish charcuterie, plate
Right,
that he
the
does.
smokes,
like
right,
that's like
sure.
That fish plate's
Smoked
to die
pickles.
for.
That's a great way of using
That's I have it every time I go there. Pierogies
So
and fish
I
plates,
think
like,
I think
advertise it.
that my biggest concern with the fish scenario is the idea that people are often ordering escolar and they think that they're having Chilean sea bass, or the use of the word
That's a
fresh.
dangerous swap, actually.
I know.
Yeah.
Or the use of the word fresh, which according to truth and menu laws, if anything's ever been frozen, you're not allowed to do. And so if you're keeping there's no way to get, for example, shrimp here that haven't been frozen.
Well, I think grocery stores say like refreshed.
Do they really?
It's horrible.
That's terrible.
Anyone that doesn't get that
Who
is
says refresh?
No, a lot of people do. I think a lot of people say
That's
that.
what I have to do on my browser or my computer when it's not working.
No, it's actually a buying term as well. So like if you have something like Chilean sea bass, which we all know is like the Patagonian toothfish, right?
Yeah.
Nobody would
Stop
ever buy
eating Chilean sea bass, people.
Nobody would ever buy that if it was called Patagonian toothfish. So they named it something pretty.
Or if they put a picture of a Patagonian toothfish on the menu.
Yeah, but they bought the crap out of it. It's still only just a mild, bland vessel that has a decent amount of texture and holds moisture fairly well. So when inexperienced cooks weld it, that it can hold its moisture and people will be able to be palatable. That's all it really is, and it's like $25 a pound, right? So, I mean, like, you can. I lost my train of thought on
That's
that.
okay. Let's.
I'm just saying, like, I mean, you can call it whatever you want.
So here's the question. Let's boil it down. If we're talking about truth in menu, and we're going to switch then to talking about farms, and we'll bleed into that with this. Okay. The issue, my concern is that people are not always being told the truth on the menu, and that there isn't really a police force out there sort of like protecting the consumer. And we're seeing this happen all the time in Western New York, and I think it happens everywhere. Where I see it happen the most in this community is, first of all, the Chilean sea bass is a common one.
That's what I was saying about that. It's never not been frozen.
Right.
You can't buy a fresh Chilean sea bass fillet.
The misselling of shrimp is another big one that the perception that shrimp is fresh or what kind of shrimp it is, and we know, and then in addition to that, the use of farms inappropriately on menus, the perception that something you're eating is from a local farm when it's not. Sure. And sometimes that perception happens because somebody's actually put the farm name on the menu where it doesn't belong. Somewhere, and sometimes it's because people have said, we buy from these farms, but there's no identification on the menu of what of those food items are actually purchased from farms. You're just supposed to assume that all of it comes from a farm.
Right. They could have bought kale and the asparagus is not.
Right. Or, so let's talk about those things. So let's talk about the idea of how you guys feel about truth in menu as part of your professional career, and is how you feel when you go into a restaurant and you look at a menu. Do you question its authenticity? Do you question, the information that's on that menu?
There's such a gray area in this topic because for me, I go to a restaurant and I'm certainly interested in where they're getting all their food from, but I also don't want to be overwhelmed with just huge descriptions of every farm that they're using. So it's really I don't know. For us,
are you taken away from the restaurant experience when you push too much of that stuff into the customer's face?
What we try to do is educate all our servers on and not really put much at all on the menu because
that's very stylish these days too.
Right,
I would say that's the way things are going.
The personability of service is incredibly important.
Yeah,
and
so
it's a waste. Some people don't pay attention to it.
So we print out a 3-page pre-service notes for our servers every day, and it'll list ingredients, it'll list preparations, and we'll just update that. I update that every day, and so we pass that around, we talk about it, and that's kind of our way of educating them. But then we try to engage customers, because you get a certain amount of people that come in and that want to know everything.
Yes.
Probably pretty small. You get a big group of people that, kind of care and want to know what you're using.
Or tell their friends.
Yeah, but it's not like 100, their main focus. Then you get a bunch of people that don't care. That just don't care.
Well, your regulars really don't care.
Right.
Yeah, or they do care and they know. There's some regulars that come in and they ask every time. Where is this from? What is this?
But if it comes from up the street, from an organic biodynamic farm or whatever, and it's hand coddled from the farm to your table, and it's terrible, it doesn't matter. It's still got to be delicious.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we've been saying on this podcast all year, just local isn't better, better is better.
Right. Yeah.
And lots of times because of ship times and because of, just freshness and the care taken, local is better.
Yeah, for
sure.
But
local isn't always better.
Well, I think...
In fact, there's a organization in the area that, is promoting a local menu, but then, for example, is serving Salins ham because Salins is from Buffalo. we all know those pigs aren't from anywhere in Western New York,
Sure.
and that they're probably even partially processed by the time Salins gets them. But they're selling people on this idea of a local menu.
yeah.
We also have, several times Rich Tillieu, who owns Tea Meadow Farm, has called me shaking with anger because a restaurant that he is not familiar with
Sure.
has printed Tea Meadow pork chop on their menu when he knows for certain
He didn't
that
sell
they're
them
not
the pig.
buying from him because he knows who his
'Cause he's only got a
customers
couple
are.
pigs. Yeah.
And
Right.
they're too expensive retail for any small restaurant charging $15 a pork chop
go
to
buy
be
at the
able to be
market,
buying.
yeah. Right.
So, there's this challenge that's happening as we increase the profile of local farmers, and
Sure.
people get a taste of what something really fresh and really local can taste like. There's this increased desire for it, but there's not always the ability within the restaurant to either deal with the cost or the distribution or the whatever hassles of buying local. But they still want their customers to think they're selling local.
I think the problem is, those people have to sleep at night. You got to know that. When I go and we talk to Dan and Jane Oles or Rich or even like Frank and those guys at Spenda's or Native Offerings too, when you meet them and you hang out with their family and stuff, that money you're giving them is going to them. You know what I mean? Like you go out and sit in the field out there and you're like, man, I'm picking these carrots. Yes, they are incredibly delicious, but you also know that, that's this guy's livelihood. The people that are saying that they're buying the other stuff and or even if it's, a market, like, there's a food market in Rochester that's like a not a producer owned one.
Yes.
Where they can bring in kind of like the terminal for
So
groceries
almost
and sell it.
so a farmer's market, you're saying,
Yeah.
where people are buying secondhand goods.
And I think,
They're selling lemons and grapefruits and pineapples.
The Clinton Bailey one can do that too, right?
Yeah.
People they can buy distributor stuff.
I believe there's only 2 farmers markets out of the 27 or something farmers markets in Western New York that have rules where you cannot bring in goods purchased from another food seller.
So you can't. You can't fault those people for having to do what they need to do for their business to make their profit margin work or make their product work, and they're selling to a customer that they know their customer obviously will take it and accept it and at least be happy with it to a certain extent. So you can't really fault them, but the people that are actually legitimately falsifying the truth in menu part of their sourcing, the type of product, like the fish being another fish or the pork being another type of pork, or getting it from a farm, saying you got it from a farm, not getting. Those people have to sleep at night. So if that's what you want to do, it's hard from a customer to swallow that, and from another restaurateur, as Gedra will say, the us that are doing it the hard way.
And it's hard.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Sourcing local.
You beat yourself up at night going, man, is it worth it for me to keep doing it this way?
And I don't think that customers really fully appreciate how challenging sourcing local really is.
I think that's the
especially in this community where
The
we do
ability to
not
do it,
have
just the technical
a
ability,
delivery
too.
system that has connected with the farmers and then is working with the chefs. We have farmers that are reaching out and driving out to the chefs, and we have chefs that are reaching out and driving out to the farmers, and that's huge because we didn't have that in 2007 or something.
No,
so it's a great thing.
It's made it more available to us for
But
sure.
there's huge shortcomings in terms of there being enough local food, it being available at a price that makes it accessible for restaurants that aren't just charging fine dining prices, and then of course the issue with just because it's local doesn't make it better.
I think it's funny that we had the conversation earlier today about the onions. We were talking about
We were talking about Walla Walla sweets and Vidalia onions and
like
people misusing those terms.
Onions having their specific provenance, and if I'm not mistaken, the Vidalia was Georgia, right? Somewhere in that
It
area.
is Georgia.
Yeah. So I am from Louisiana. They grow a lot of sweet onions. There may be a strain biologically that is the Vidalia onion that is grown in the hot temperatures of northern Louisiana, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, and they call them Vidalia onions too. It could just be like the ignorance of and not really ignorance, but like the uneducated of that particular grower to say, okay, somebody told me this is Vidalia onion. It happens to be a pretty sweet onion, so we're going to call it Vidalia because that's the only sweet onion I know.
Right.
But we were saying that I would, instead of me doing that and being accused of like, oh my God, that's not actually a Vidalia onion, that's something else. I would just say, I would just prefer to say it's a sweet onion
Right.
on my menu, or some people say like whitefish, right? Like, so it could be. It could be herring,
100
could be
things.
cod, could
Sure.
be. But if you're gonna do that, like if you know that you're not gonna source, Pacific or Atlantic cod, right? So and you say I'm gonna have whitefish, then
That's usually if you're like, I think whitefish would be like if you're making like a croquette or something, or cooking in some way that, because most people don't want to buy at like, especially at a any restaurant that seems to be like reputable, just a piece of fish that's called whitefish.
Although in the Midwest, you put,
it's breaded whitefish, right? It's like chattel
or smoked whitefish.
Right,
it's like
it could
everywhere.
It could be the lake trout. It could be
and usually that's what it is. It's local,
right? Yeah.
But I think around here, if you put something on your menu, and if I put something on my menu and it's called it whitefish, people would be like
roasted whitefish.
Right.
What is it?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because I think that what we have to understand is that there's just a certain dollar level that local doesn't work at. And so if you're somewhere and the menu, everything's under $15 and they're using highfalutin terms, or saying the farm that it's from, that's almost impossible to do, really.
Right.
There's just not the margin built into that. But I think that feeds into this idea then that local farm fresh food is only for people who are wealthy, which is so tragically sad because if you talk to farmers from all over Western New York, they're throwing away tons and tons and tons of food every year because they have no place to put it, and yet we have all these food deserts of people like starving for fresh food. Yeah. It's just so messed up and backwards. I don't know.
That's a great example of people throwing away food. Not being able to move what they have from farms. We work because what we do. We have approximately 10 farms that we work with. And talking
You're
about
in close proximity though.
We are. We have a bunch that are in East Aurora
down there.
We use a couple. From Niagara County. We also do the CSA with Native Offerings. So we do a lot of different stuff. And talking about like the difficulties of it, I think the logistics of it is really hard. You always have a lot of people that have the same stuff. The nice thing is when you have diversity, so that helps build the diversity, I think, with using the more you use, you find some unique stuff that everyone has.
If you went to a winter market and saw 5 tables of celeriac, beets, radish, black radish, kohlrabi,
same like
celery squashes, apples, rutabaga, celeriac, right? And you would just be like, man, how do I pick this one versus that one? Because they're both great.
Yeah.
But if you have some diversity, for sure.
And you see the ordering of it. The delivery, everyone does it different. Everyone sells in different quantities. You're getting bushels, you're getting cases, you're getting pounds. Then you're trying to price stuff, and you're working in and then you're paying people different ways, and it's just there's so much to it.
Well, and then when you get in like a giant kohlrabi, bonanza, RJ's gonna spend a week doing nothing but pickling kohlrabi. Yeah. And if you don't have the ability as a restaurant to make use of all of that product or to store it, how many ways can you put kohlrabi on your menu in a day?
Yeah, I think for us, Quince was the best example of that. Like he was like. We broke out some quince the other day, and he was like, no quince next year, please, because we're getting into all this quince as much as we can, local stuff that we can process into quince paste or jams or, pickling, all different stuff.
Doesn't quince only produce like once a year or something?
It's got a pretty small
it'll be like
window.
2 years till you have all that quince again.
Yeah. So we were like, we brought in tons, and it's just a pain. It's all knobby. And
it's not easy.
Pain to peel, and then you have to cook it for a long time. There's just a lot of different stuff to do. Yeah, that eloquence.
Eloquence steampunk cider. Yeah.
But yeah, there's some things like that you want to take advantage of, and it's just got a short season. But then you're looking at a time like right now where you can still get a ton of local stuff. Especially like I said, using a lot of different farmers. There's a lot available.
It didn't used to be that way.
Right.
No.
When we started all this local farm movement stuff in 2007, in the wintertime, there was not anybody, not one person who was growing things. And by February, anything that they had cold storage, except for maybe onions, was gone.
And that's what you can see right now. Like I can see things running out. Like at this time, but they're trying to plan.
Trying to plan to meet the demand.
Yeah,
and you see Adam come up with guys that are doing hothouse greens, or Dan trying to pull tomatoes all the way into January. I think he had the hoops up. People trying to do things to accommodate the need of the market, but those things are going to come at a cost too. If you want field greens, if you want arugula that's like baby or micros or anything in frickin' February. They're going to be double what they are when they can grow them outside on a normal summer.
We got some greens from Plato-Dale yesterday, and we had basically taken most of the greens off the menu because we're like trying to not have greens, when we can't get them as much as we can, and he's like, I got these greens. He's like, we had kind of a rough day at the market today. Do you want them? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, and he's just like, I'm just going to stop by. You can look at them if you want them. If you don't take them. You know, he stopped by and he's like, just take some of these and pay for these. And like, he just kind of, you know, you can see they're experimenting and they're learning at this. Like, it's hard. I think it's probably harder for them than it is for us, but it's so hard for them to know how much to make. You know,
and they're now trying to plan for next year.
Yeah, that's
right?
the thing.
And especially the ones who are new to the restaurant game, the Plato Dale or, you know, Prud'homme or whatever, have only been working with restaurants for a year or two. Yeah. It's a whole different deal than like Dan Oles, who, you know, has been under the wing now since the 2008 or whatever. Right. You know, it's a whole different learning curve.
Yeah,
he does. He has a great system. But so the problem, I think, is as a consumer, you know, if those sorts of things are important to you and you walk into a restaurant and you think that restaurant has a local farm food program because it's all over all their marketing or it's all over the menu or it's what the server's talking about, you really, other than your taste buds, have no way of telling if that's a true deal.
It's true. You have to trust in the person. You have to, you know, hope that restaurateur or chef has merit and they have a conscience, you know, that they're going to say that they're not going to try to stiff you. And it's very difficult. I mean, it really is a sad state to say that, you know, this fish I'm eating might not be what it is. But again, we talked about the same way. Like, you need to be more educated. Like, you need to know a little bit more about maybe not the product, because maybe you've never had escalar, or maybe you've never had, you know, mangrove snapper. Like, but be a little more educated about your restaurateur. Be a little more educated about the chef or the server. You know, ask them the questions. Like, if that, you know, okay, well, we have Florida grouper. Well, is it really from Florida? When did it come in? You know, like, where'd you get it from?
I think the other question is how many people, like, care that much about those questions. Is there a ton of people? Is it 90%? You know, is it 50% of the people that come into your restaurant? So that's a really interesting question. So I don't know if you want to, like, I always like kind of weigh like beating them over the head with it and then letting them ask and kind of having the education, because, you know, there's extremes to everything, you know. So I think finding that middle where you can answer the questions. You know, at Elm Street, we're kind of lucky that we're out in the open, so we can answer a lot of questions.
Because of your open kitchen.
Yeah, and we get a lot of questions, and we're able to answer them.
You're dealing directly with the sourcing, though, too, so you can answer it intelligently.
Right, and it's even then, sometimes it's hard. We're like, man, like, I got these kohlrabis. I've been getting kohlrabi from, like, you know, 8 or 3 different people. I'm like, all right, I got to think about where this kohlrabi's from there. You know, so, like, you know, just writing on your bins, like, what farmer comes from, or, you know, like, just keeping track of it all.
More work, more cost.
Yeah, I think the amount of work that goes into running a restaurant that's using farms, especially in Buffalo, is
double.
And like in Colorado, we used a company they had the whole thing set up.
Correct, which is what I was just talking about, where there's a guy in the middle. And we have a gentleman who does this, actually. I just had lunch with him last week, or dinner, who does this in Chautauqua, who has 23 farms that he works with and, you know, 24 restaurants, and that's all he does all through the busy year.
He buys it at,
and we've tried,
at their cost, and then resells it, organized,
and he also does
and
legumes and cheese and the whole nine. And, like, we desperately need that person here, and I will totally tell them how to do what they need to do. Yeah. We just need somebody with, like, a refrigerator truck and a space and a mission, and we could totally make this work.
Yeah, because I think Finger Lake Farms is doing that same type of thing throughout the Finger Lakes and Rochester and all that.
You know, they're dropping a lot of different products in on their
and we use them too. Now. We'll get like a bunch of stuff from them as well. But they're using a bunch of different farms. They have their farms listed. You know, whether they're picking up or people are dropping off, and then they have a central ordering sheet, and you're ordering from them. You know, it certainly makes it easier.
Like a farm distributor.
Yeah.
But true farm distributor.
We have gone over the years to many of the local food distributors and asked them to simply, because many of them are at Clinton Bailey, Niagara Food Terminal in the morning, buying food from local farmers. There is a good amount of local food that comes in season from local food truck services. But the problem is that we've asked them to make separate lists that just designate what they have in their warehouse. It's local, and even charge an extra $1 a pound, so that when I call and order poblano peppers, I know that they're Tony Weiss's poblano peppers and not California poblano peppers. But we haven't been able to talk anybody into seeing the wisdom into doing that yet, and it's really unfortunate. I think I see somebody.
I mean, we dealt with Desiderios a lot at the club, and I know for a fact that Craig would be out there at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely.
You know, Craig Lee was probably. I mean, he's like the produce ninja.
Yeah.
For
I really encourage anyone who wants
for a
to.
humongous company that they are.
Yeah,
I mean, he'll be
great.
out there in their parking lot where it's probably right there. You know,
It
like when
is.
they go and he'll go out there and be like, all right, we're buying all this red leaf for the net. How long you got it? 12 weeks. We're gonna buy all of it. You know what I mean? Like, because it's good, and if you keep the quality the way it is, we'll continue to buy it. And so the guy will do that. And I think it takes a little bit of give on both ends. Like, it takes more work, obviously, for Craig to do that rather than to call and get a container from California.
Sure.
Because he could probably do that from his phone in the morning. Like, you know, like it would just show up the next day. It takes him a little more work to go out there and expand the product, which he's certainly willing to do. But it also takes a little bit of onus on the farmer, too, to say, you know, we're going to meet the demand, and that would probably go for restaurants and distributors as well. We're going to meet the demand and say our quality level will always be at least this. This is the price you will pay for that quality level, so that he can trust in that and he can make that relationship work. So,
Well, and I'll tell anybody, if you go down there in the growing season on a Tuesday or Thursday, I think it is, at 4 a.m, and I've done it, go down there and have breakfast with those guys and hang out. It used to be that there were 100 farmers down there. Now there's 15, and they're all 70. But they're out there with their baskets of giant, beautiful produce, and they're selling it wholesale. So, I mean, that's a great way for a small chef to buy local during season.
But small restaurateurs, guys that's working until 12, 1
I
or 2
know,
o'clock
he's
in the
not getting
morning.
up at
You're
4
going to get up at 4 to go down
I
there?
know.
I mean, like, so.
But that's
so,
how they
like,
used to do it in this city.
Now we're talking about
30
that
years
amount of
ago,
work.
that's
Kim-
how you would buy your produce.
Kim, the owner of Elm Street, she goes during the summer at 4 or 5 in the morning.
Sure.
Goes down there because she
Loads
likes
the
it. She gets
truck.
up early. She
It's
exercises.
nice.
And
It's
she goes
actually
and,
really
like,
beautiful.
Yeah, she really likes it. I've never been down
It's
there.
so
early.
peaceful. It's
Yeah.
really nice.
So she'll
Road
go
is good.
and and she knows everybody down there, and she'll buy whatever. And I think the thing that for us in Elm Street is that we change our menu as we need to, or as we want to and need to, and that is another aspect that makes it harder for restaurants to kind of use like local now, because someone's out of something, they're out of it.
Right. And you have to change your menu.
You have to change your menu.
You got to know though when you plan your menu, and I think that getting back to the truth in menu part of it, it's like you have to be able to make the menu to use the products. I mean, like it's a reality. I mean, you can't trust that.
James,
you're
when
gonna
we
have,
started doing
like,
this,
local greens or something.
When we started doing this, some of our even friends of ours today didn't know what month asparagus came in, or thought that strawberries in January were the same thing as strawberries in August. Like they just didn't know, because we live in a world where we believe we're supposed to have access to everything all the time, and we bring in so much produce.
We're all slowly getting into it, though.
I understand. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm saying if you go in the grocery store right now, you can buy strawberries. They'll be white inside. They won't taste like a strawberry, but they look like a strawberry. So people just don't know. And so the idea of then changing produce coming in and out of season within 10 days and having to change your menu and roll with that and being okay with that and price out a new dish and whatever, that was very overwhelming just a short time ago to a lot of people in the community.
It's still hard. And
it's still hard.
I mean, look at like Buffalo the last 2 years with the winters we've had, starting so early, going late.
Yes.
What was our strawberry season this year was super short.
Yes.
I mean,
or even if you remember, like 3 years ago, we had so much rain in the summertime that like half of the people's fields were flooded and they couldn't even get their tractor out there to.
I think
get stuff.
blight with tomatoes this year was like absurd.
Yeah,
People are just,
it was really brutal.
Like talking about not growing tomatoes. Some of the farmers
Because they lost so much money.
Like, we're not doing them again.
and so to be able to be equipped to handle all of this is it's such a big for us at Elm Street. Like, it's a huge part of our job is just kind of dealing with what's happening, what's happening in the farms, what can we get, how much can we get, and trying to make the most of that. I think to give props to people, it's been a pretty short window that most of America started kind of really caring about this, other than like in Berkeley in the 70s, when it all started, wherever,
Moosewood and Alice Waters.
Yeah, whether or not it started
the
there,
outliers.
But there's certainly, it's been a short window, and I think that it's headed in the right direction.
It's a rapid education in America. It has been, of us to really just even come to the realization that we could do it. That as chefs we could do it. You talk about I use Adam as an example because in New York when he was there, it was kind of like the burgeoning thing. But
Adam Getz of Craving.
Yeah. So then to come back to Buffalo and have to go back into Buffalo mode to sort of meet his customers' needs.
Right.
And then now, he says it to everybody. He'll say, finally, I'm getting able to, it's fun again to cook with the seasons. And I think people like Gedro, who it's been his mantra like all along.
Right.
And then, people like us, I think, who just kind of, that was the only way we knew how to cook versus because you cook with your terroir, you cook with your customer. And like me, moving around and finding different places to cook, you kind of just cooked with your customer base. I didn't really take a lot of thought to say, oh my God, am I going to use this local product? It was kind of that was kind of the only way we knew.
Yeah, I mean, James, you reached out to me in 2008 and brought people on a farm tour.
Right.
And we're like, how do I get a CSA in my country club?
Right,
that was long before most people were doing it.
But that's all we knew. But in Louisiana, it's like you're buying shrimp off the side of the road from a guy who actually just took it off a boat. You know what I mean? Like, guy's got a basket of Merlotons. He's got 2 kids that are running the fields, pulling sweet peppers out of the field, coming back on the side of the road, and they're just loading baskets of dirty, fresh picked peppers, and onions and things like that. So it's kind of all I really knew of how to buy groceries or how to really cook. And then as a chef, the first restaurant I worked at, my guy, Joe Liguori, I'll never forget, this little baby Italian restaurant called Frisco's. He would go he was a bus driver, and he would go in the morning after his bus route and go hit all the stands and bring back the restaurant's groceries for that day. And sometimes he had to stop at the supermarket and buy the supermarket stuff. But for the most part, it was all in paper bags and cardboard boxes and crates that he just bought off some guy's truck, essentially, which is probably now, the Buffalo version or metropolitan version of a farmer's market. Because in rural America, it's 5 guys parked together on the side of the road.
That still happens here, though.
Yeah. So I think the Buffalo version.
But that's good, though. Yeah. I mean,
the Buffalo version of there was always still some connection to seasonality with
we have 7,500 farms.
We had
right.
So we are very lucky that
I think
those all didn't disappear before we figured this shit out, right?
Yeah. And I think
But you're right. Corn, strawberries, tomatoes have always been
excitement for local
peaches,
seasonal ingredients.
Yes, absolutely.
So there is that being from here. That's what I thought was amazing when those things came around in that type of season. I was like, yes, this is what I'm talking about. And as we started to build, and as you say, 2007, 2008, when we took a bunch of guys on that farm tour, that was the first one that you did. Yeah. It was just yes, let's build some access to this. Can I get this? And even at a country club, we didn't really have a way to use it. We were just I want it. We want to do it, and we're going to figure it out once we get it. Yeah. So then you start seeing the product it's like shopping. If you didn't have asparagus, blueberries, raspberries in your aisle, and you only had, when you went to the grocery store, if you only had Swiss chard, Japanese radishes, celeriac, turnips, and rutabaga, then that's what you would have to cook with. And I think, I think it's good that we see that. So in the truth and menu vein, I think that if in December, as a consumer, if you are seasonally inclined and you understand your region and where you are, if you're seeing roasted turnips and rutabaga and celeriac and things like that, heartier dishes and, legumes and storage crops and stuff like that on the menu, then you can have that trust in that person. Mm-hmm. If you see asparagus, don't get freaked out because some people, there's asparagus growing all over the world.
Yes.
I mean,
some
Peru,
people
Mexico,
want
California,
asparagus year round.
If you want it, you can have it. We have the technology these days to ship it anywhere in 3 or 4 days, and it's fresh enough to where it's delicious on your plate. Is it the same as local? Absolutely not. Is Daniel's asparagus the same as something you get from Peru? Absolutely freaking not. It's $3 a difference a pound, and it's worth every single penny. Yeah. It's what kind of value do you put on your diet? But I think from a truth and menu, if you're trying to see if your chef or if your favorite restaurant is adhering to the policies that they are proclaiming to adhere to, then you have to have a little bit of intuition and be able to look at them and say, are they selling enough of this Mako shark to have it on their menu? Right. Where did that Mako shark come from in 6 days to get to Buffalo?
Well, so I think that the one good takeaway from this is, of course, to be aware as consumers. I mean, I think it's fascinating that we have half of the country is now gluten-free, really hypersensitive to all kinds of concerns in their diet, asking all sorts of questions about things, looking for labeling that makes sense to them. Sure. And then the other half of the country, which is easily duped into believing that things are good for them that aren't at all. People who are still eating margarine rather than butter.
Those are the people that are going to get fooled. They're going to get fooled by the out of season vegetables, the swaps for the fish, the tilapia for sole.
I don't even know if it's being fooled for them. I just say that like they're just.
I wouldn't want to say the fool. Maybe they don't care,
Yeah.
but maybe some people are intentionally misleading them, especially at a cost percentage.
Yeah.
Like if you're selling something like you and I talked about, like gray sole or lemon sole, which is essentially just a flatfish flounder, for Dover sole on your menu for $39.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's
the
actually a
good
product
example.
you're paying $2.50 for that came in IQF'd in a shatter pack. There's a problem there.
Or how
that is
about-
being fooled? You're intentionally misleading your customer.
Or how about the fresh lobster tail upgrade you can get when you order your steak, and that's a $3 lobster tail that you would never feed your cat.
Right.
That's true. Well, you should know if that's a $4.99 tail that there's no lobster that costs $4.99 in Buffalo to get to Buffalo. But if you want to buy a fresh lobster and it costs you $10, $12, $15, $19 a pound at the grocery store and it's alive, and no matter how long it's been in a tank, I mean that's a whole other story. But it's alive and you eat it. I mean, like, is that worth $20 a pound? Probably $35 to you as a consumer to eat that whole lobster. I mean, that's the cost. And people, just that example alone, nobody would ever equate. I just bought a pound and a half lobster for $20 a pound. That's $30. I had to cook it myself and perfectly, and I had to clean it. You can get a lobster dish on a menu in Buffalo for $30, and people are like, "Oh my God, that's expensive."
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, oh my
true.
God, that's expensive. And I think I don't know.
Lobster price has gone down. Which is nice,
Lobster
too.
price has gone down. Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that we really have a huge separation between the two types of consumers that exist in America today. Consumers who are hyper attentive to everything they're eating, maybe not even to their own benefit, to be honest with you. And then consumers who are so inattentive that they're, convinced that the ranch dressing that they're eating actually has dairy product in it or whatever. I just think it's an unfortunate thing
amazing.
because what it really translates into is people who have money and people who don't. And that's a really unfortunate scenario.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that way.
Well, it's ironic because 40 years ago, the people that were eating amazing were the poorest people in the country.
Exactly.
It's like a return to what we wanted,
well,
what we once were.
For hundreds of years,
Yeah,
being
yeah, yeah.
overweight showed that you were wealthy.
Yeah.
And in today's world, being overweight shows that you're poor.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right?
It's a conundrum. It's like, we're trying to get back to that now, and in reality, it's just simplifying it. It's like, if, we eat local pork, we eat local beef. I mean, we're here in central New York. We eat apples. Should you just eat that? Well, no, our tastes are like, we want other stuff too in America. We can get it. So you shipping stuff from other places other than the local food is going to cost you more money. And I mean,
Still, though, I would rather have people eating fish than fish sticks.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true. Yeah.
like eating from the outside ring of the grocery store rather than the inside part of the grocery
Sure.
store. Anyway, I just want to thank you guys for being here today, and I want to wrap up with each of you telling me what the thing is that you're most excited about when it comes into season.
Oof, shit, that's a tough question.
Well, I'll give you a second to think. My favorite thing is asparagus. Dan Oles asparagus. You mentioned it already.
Yeah.
When his stuff comes, it means spring is here.
Gedra, quit buying all the damn asparagus.
No shit, right?
He hawks it like
It's-
he's like hoards it. It's like Happy Van Winkle.
I know.
It's like he's like, hey yo, I got 12 pounds today. What'd you get? I'm like, I got nothing because you bought it all.
But I've had the privilege of standing in the field and pulling the
Yeah.
asparagus out of the ground
Yeah.
and
When
eating
Dan
it when
scra-
it's
when
still
Dan- yeah.
cold outside, but the sun is shining, and it's just
when he cracks
like
it
the
off and hands
best
it to you, it's like
freaking
sugar.
thing.
It's like it's worth
Oh,
any price.
it's amazing. So that's my thing that to me is like, I mean, I used to feel that way about fiddleheads, but these days our spring is so short-lived and it's so sloggy and it's not so much fun that I'm really the asparagus to me is like the marker
James
now.
actually showed me his fiddlehead spot. I
Oh,
love
you
it.
got, I haven't been to the
Yeah.
fiddlehead spot.
We got, it's
I
a
always have to
It's a
work.
honey hole.
It is. It's absurd. It's not even that bad. Like there's so many of them that you can just pick them.
Yeah, no, we do. We don't even
Fuck both of you.
we don't, and we adhere to the rule too. We only take like the
One
top
for
5
every
of the
three or
right,
whatever.
the top 5 of the cluster. So like
Yeah.
you leave the pod and like I mean that spot is probably tripled. Since
Okay, so wait, we got to get back.
Jen
James,
Steinrook showed me that spot, by the way. Shout out to my girl Jen.
James, what's the
I would have to say, I mean, Southern boy at heart. I would have to say, soft shell crab season is probably my number one. It coincides with crawfish season from my childhood, so for us, it was like the bounty of like we're going to get into, brown shrimp season starts, the redfish start hitting. I mean, like a lot of things in the southern Gulf of Mexico ecosystem start kicking off when it starts hitting, that mid-March and April.
Yep.
But being up here, I start the indicator is like Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. I mean, when they start hitting soft shell crabs, when they start molting, that is like, I know that it's on. I mean, like and to be honest, and a lot of chefs down south will tell you, I eat like the first 6.
Yeah.
Like I don't. Nobody else gets them. As soon as they come in the door, if they come in the door and
Faces get cut off.
It
Batter goes on.
It takes a lot. It takes a lot to get them here still soft, because a lot of the purveyors locally will still get what we call in Louisiana, we call them paper shells, which is actually a molted crab that's actually been out of the shell more than 2 days. So it's not actually truly that soft gelatinous shell. It's actually
it's
like a
eating
paper bag.
fingernails.
So everybody says that. And you know what? That's what people hate about soft shell crabs. Is
That's what I hate about soft shell
oh my God,
crabs.
it's like chewing on fish. But if you've had one, perfect.
It's real.
Like right out
So
of the
James,
shell.
at Toutant, will we be able to get real
God,
soft?
I hope so. We're flying it in.
Brother.
We're flying it in on a daily basis. So if the airplane can get here in time, I will have them soft as the pillow that I sleep on.
All right.
Testify.
I'll be looking forward to
Yeah.
that.
I'm waiting for it.
And
I'm waiting for it.
if there's one hint of fingernail, I'm kicking your ass.
No.
That's what
just know that you will not get the first 6. They're going to be in my
I got
belly.
that.
Cooking in an open kitchen, cleaning soft shell crabs to order is probably the most enjoyable, or at least the most interesting.
Because people
item.
freak
because
out.
People seeing you pull it out, it's moving, cut off the face, and then pull out
Rip the gills
It's
off.
way more brutal than the
People are
lobster
like,
ever.
some people were like, what are you doing right
It's
now?
barbaric. It's
Yeah,
barbaric. Like,
yeah.
You're ripping the lungs out
Yeah.
of a still
we had
breathing
people
animal.
that were like just freaking. I couldn't.
Was that its
believe
gonads?
that
Yeah.
we just
Yeah,
did
yeah, they're
that
gone.
right there. So that's pretty fun.
Yeah,
But,
people think lobster screaming, quote
I
unquote,
know.
in the pot is bad.
You wanna see the
It's
soft
nothing
shell crabs
compared to
looking
soft
at
shell.
you.
Yeah, when you cut their face off.
I would say
It's so
I would
bad.
say for a local add on to that, when the first apples, the first non-storage apples show up at the market, is incredible.
Yeah. August.
Like that. Just it's still summer,
Early
and they're
August.
beautiful and they're big, and I mean, tomatoes the same way.
I think,
let's not give
See,
it.
you're
I'm
getting
not-
all
for me, I know
excited now.
that's what I was going to say.
I'm not going
Your
to say
tomatoes?
I wish it wasn't as obvious as it is, but like I love peas when they come in because you know it's the start of something.
That's when we're going to start getting
ramps
a lot
are
of
the same
food.
thing.
Yeah, we're on them
ramps are
right,
fun.
right.
You know,
We're
everyone
soon,
loves
right,
that.
me and you?
I was talking.
We're soon and ramping.
Earlier today about ramps and about how it's kind of there's almost more
Melt,
people
snow,
saying they
melt.
don't like ramps now because they're so popular. So
Yeah.
you know, it's
Yeah,
so,
whatever.
right?
The Rams have jumped the shark.
I know that's what people definitely feel that.
Screw
way.
that.
I
It's
know.
still the first vegetable we get.
It's dynamite.
Oh,
Ramps are the
winner.
shit.
Dynamite. They're
So
dynamite.
walking out into like East Aurora is a good spot for it. Like it's where you get a lot of people go, right?
Yeah.
Like out into like the different farms or parks and stuff. And so that's awesome. I know no names mentioned though. So anyway, but
not
I think
give the
tomatoes.
location
Like I don't
away.
think I get more excited. Like I love ramps. That's such a fun
Trek.
Well,
ritual.
after the whole
right?
winter of
Yeah.
being stuck inside and we don't all see each other, and then it's
Yeah.
ramp season, everybody puts
Everyone's
on their boots,
texting,
and goes
like,
out,
we're
and everybody
going.
gets so excited.
Yeah.
Goes out in the morning, and
Mondays out
in the
there,
mud.
and
Yeah,
we're drinking
no.
in the morning. We're
If you guys don't invite me this year, I'm fucking kicking your ass.
know.
I'm
We've
just
been-
saying.
Isn't that one of the
Last
most
year I had to
fun-
work.
We've been known to bring 40s. ramping.
Yeah, what a great that is.
Actually,
like,
Brad
such
brings
a
craft
fun,
cellared beer.
Yeah, that's true.
Of course he does.
Such a fun ritual for the year as chefs, right?
Yeah, I think
Is
so.
ramps, but
It's
I think
let's get this shit going.
the
Let's
most
get it on.
exciting though for me is still tomatoes.
Tomatoes
Like,
are the best.
When you get because they build it up, like they're like.
they're not
couple
ready
weeks,
yet. They're not ready yet.
Couple
Yeah.
weeks,
Yeah.
couple weeks,
No.
and it's like always
Where's the
coming.
tomatoes?
I mean, this year was late, like with the rough winters. It was late,
July, right?
Um,
June.
Yeah, like
July.
it was, and so getting that, and then the season was short.
They
as well,
usually
but,
don't
like,
come till mid to late July,
Yeah.
but this year they didn't even come. I don't think till the first or second week
exactly.
of August.
It was rough, but so you
And
have
we didn't have a
build-up.
lot
The
of
babies
them.
show
I
up
know.
a lot, though. The little ones.
The
show up
babies,
quick.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's
I think-
for me. I just can't beat that. Like you get those tomatoes,
Fresh
and you're
tomato,
like,
warm
and you're
from the
eating
sun,
them, and
off
it's
the
like they're
vine
so
is
sweet.
is
and,
unbelievable.
Eating them in the field is the
you get to
best
see who
when they're
has
hot.
different stuff and like what
Do you have a
different varieties.
favorite varietal?
Man, I don't know. Some of the Daniels, like his heirloom cherries, are awesome.
Sugar.
Tony
Sugar
Weiss.
drop.
Tony Weiss grows those ones that are like the size of a blueberry.
100s, I believe.
Oh my god, they're so good! I want to make a pie out
Yeah,
of
but
those.
you can roast those on the vine.
They're unbelievable.
Right? You just blister them on the vine and serve
Oh,
them. Then you
they're
do that.
so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grow at my house a bunch of tomatoes. So does James.
Yeah.
And that's another really rewarding thing is like get your own first tomato is pretty exciting
Yeah.
as well.
I don't wait. I can't wait. I always pick like the half ripe one and put it on the windowsill, and it sucks. You know what I mean?
You're trying to push
I'm like,
it.
I want it. And Connie will be sitting out there, and she'll wait till they fall off the vine in the back.
That's
and
the way to
and
go.
She'll go scoop them up, and she's eating this awesome salad, and I'm stuck with the one on the windowsill. Waiting for it to ripen.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you guys for being here with us today and for this sort of random chat. But I really enjoyed it, and it's stuff we talk about all the time.
Yeah,
so,
Guys, be truthful on your menus.
Keep it
Keep it real.
it doesn't really serve anyone any purpose.
It doesn't do any justice to anybody. Just, if it's not what you think it is, just say what it is and prepare it with heart and serve it to people you love. And that's
And you know
the way
what?
to
Even
go.
if you're
Make
stuck
it
in a
delicious.
restaurant, even if you're stuck working in a restaurant where your chicken comes out of a bag and all the stuff comes off a Cisco truck,
Right. Take
you
care
can
of it.
still make your food with love.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a Henry Ford. You don't have to be a
No.
shoemaker. You can still care and love about your processed
Take
cheese
your time,
Parmesan
take
thing.
your time and serve it with love. It's all that matters.
Yeah, I think in just keeping the integrity, teaching your cooks about integrity and about
Product integrity.
And just about being truthful to your customers and looking them in the eye and telling them where it comes from.
Sure.
I think that will be what raises the next generation.
That'll save the
And,
next generation. That's an excellent
of
point. That's an
just-
excellent point.
It's like saying
Because-
you're gonna tell the truth no matter what, and this is what
Bad
we
or
do.
good.
And I
Take
think
your
if you can
lumps.
teach that. I read a good article in Eater Toronto with Fergus Henderson.
Sure,
and
I saw
it was,
that.
and it talked about integrity and not lying. Restaurants that don't lie being its like favorite restaurants. And I was like, that was a couple years ago, and I was like, that is awesome. Like that's
awesome.
You know what? Wouldn't honestly, blanket statement, everything would be better if we were all functioning with integrity all the time. Everything would be better. And I think that for
just keep trying
people
to do our part.
who got paranoid, maybe listening to this, worrying that the food they think that they're getting from their restaurant might not be what they think they're getting.
That guy's working just as hard as we are.
Well, and you know what? Open your refrigerator door, look at all the ingredients lists on the back of all of your condiments, and just shut up and go have dinner. Like, really, what you're feeding yourself at home probably isn't any worse than what anybody's giving you in a
probably way worse,
restaurant.
yeah.
But
Because
it's
we
great
do it
if you could
professionally.
build a relationship with a restaurant, trust a restaurant, and have that restaurant impart their trust by sharing with you what they do. It's a great thing.
build a relationship. That,
It is.
I mean, that's
That's what integrity and relationships. That's what it's all
That's
about.
what it's always been.
All right, love you guys. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Christa.
Thank you.